I was assigned to Korea. We were up north in the JSA. We hear a gunshot. There's bullets flying back and forth from us to them. But as the bullets are flying, we're fighting against the KPA, and they're on our side. My team leader is M203. He's going to launch grenades over to where they are. I am sitting at a table. We're in Kuwait. I noticed an object that was sparking. I jump up immediately, run to the back of the tent. Then I hear a gunshot. After that gunshot, I hear a yell. A frag grenade had gone off in my tent. Frag grenade had gone off in the second tent, in the third tent, and someone else was shot. So we have casualties in all three tents. Okay, it's one of our own people. So we're looking for one of our own. He's apprehended, and he was asked, why he did it. He had kept a diary. So he wrote many anti-American things in his diary. They are his words. So exactly he says, Bart Womack, Command Sergeant Major, retired United States Army, where I served for 29 and a half years. I retired at the rank of, just said it, Command Sergeant Major. I had always worked, and my next oldest brother had wrecked the family car that I used to go to work, right? And I already graduated high school. I was 17 years old. I was waiting to go to college. I was going to wait a year, right? So I was just working, and always worked. Started working at age 13, probably 11, I should say, with the paper route, and just kept working, right? And anyway, I'm working this job, and I would drive the car as transportation to work. And then he wrecked the car. I had to start taking a bus. So one evening, and transferring buses, I decided to walk in between the transfer points and stumbled upon the recruiter's office. And it was late October, early November, Columbus, Ohio, cold. So I just said, let me go in this recruiting office here. I'll get warm, get some cocoa or something. And I know they're going to give me their spiel, but I'll get warm, then I'll leave and go catch my bus. So I go in there, and sure enough, they had this spiel. It lasted for quite some time. I got warm, and then I left. I was 17 years old, so I needed my mother to sign for me. So raised by a single-parent mother. So a few weeks went on. He would call the house, and my mother was never home when he called. So you have to wait till she comes home. And my birthday is in December, right? So finally my birthday came. I finally told my mother about that incident, if you will. And she said, well, now you're 18. You can join on your own if that's what you want to do. I think another week or so went by. We get into January. I finally said, okay, let's see what this is about. And I ended up taking the test and then ship off in February of the next year. Ironically, when I went to work and told them that I was joining the military, before I could get that out of my mouth, they said, we're laying off, so you're going to be laid off in 2 weeks anyway. So, okay, perfect timing. So that's what got me to the military. So it wasn't necessarily inspiration, even though my oldest brother had served. There wasn't this thing that said, hey, I want to join the military. It was just, happenstance, if you will. Boot camp. I had been an athlete. I didn't play. I was a low guy in high school. In those years, high school was 10, 11, 12th grade. When I got in high school, I was 5'2", 110 pounds. But I had played football growing up and wanted to play football. But so I'd go there and say, what's the weight limit? It's like, dude, there's no weight limit. Like, oh, shit, I'm not getting crushed by those big dudes. I relied on the helmet to protect me from big guys, but that wasn't going to work. So I went to other sports or whatever. But anyway, excuse me, basic training was, basic training. You got the drill sergeants hauling at you and all that type of stuff. But I wasn't necessarily overly intimidated by them. And I had Vietnam veteran drill sergeants. But I didn't find it, overly difficult. You're going to have some struggles there. You got to build a team and cohesion and all those things with a group of people that you don't know. So that's always kind of difficult in the beginning. It was at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, so you got to deal with the sand and the heat that comes up pretty quick, even though I started out in February. But it was okay. I think an epic moment was when they got all of us in a room, or told the whole platoon that you had to go to this briefing for Airborne school. And I didn't know what Airborne was. They said jumping out of airplanes. Oh, shoot, you gotta be crazy. I'm not going there. Well, everybody has to go. So you had to go to that briefing. And it was pretty intriguing briefing if you really wanted to jump out of airplanes, which I had no interest in until the end. The guy said you get an extra $55 a month. I was like, okay, I'm in. Where do I sign? So that's what got me into airborne school. So after basic training, I had AIT, and then AIT, I go to my first unit, which is the 82nd Airborne Division, where I served for, I think about a year and a half or so. Then I would get an assignment to Korea. Me and a guy that I work with said, let's go to Korea. They said, join the Army, see the world. So we're going to Korea. I make it to Korea. He doesn't. I don't know what happened. I never saw the guy again. But I do my year in Korea, come back to the 82nd. I think I served for another, probably about 9 or 10 months. And then I re-enlisted, and then I'm assigned to Turkey. So I spent a year in Turkey. And I played all kinds of sports. I played our higher headquarters, even though we're stationed in Turkey, our higher headquarters was in Italy. So if every sport championship, if you will, from that level, if your unit won, then you went to Italy with the rest of the units that were in the command to play against them for the title for that particular championship, right? So I played basketball, I played flag football, I played tennis, I ran track, and what was the last one? I think, volleyball, right? I played everything. So I remember being in Naples playing tennis, and it's probably there for 2 weeks. Finished that, went back to Turkey, was there for 3 days just to get on another flight to come right back to Italy for track. And then I was trying to go for flag football, and boss said, oh, stop, wait a minute. Look, dude, you spent more time in Italy than you have in Turkey, so you're not going for flag football. So it wasn't until the end of my time in Turkey that he allowed me to go play. Actually, bosses changed, and I was allowed to go play volleyball. So I spent a lot of time in Italy playing sports, which is pretty cool for just a 1-year assignment. While there, I met this guy that was a drill sergeant. That was an inspiration as well. He was a ranger. And those two things, intrigued me. But first was a drill sergeant. And by this time, I'm probably just about 4 years or so removed from, basic training myself, but wanted to be a drill sergeant. And at the time, that was the thing in the Army, if you could do that. So I ended up putting my pack for drill sergeant school and getting accepted for that. And this is about at the 5-year mark that I've been in the Army. It's only 5 years. Boom, I'm a drill sergeant at 23 years old. And so that experience was pretty cool in that, like I said, just 5 years, like I was just one of them not too long ago. But now the tables have reversed, and now I'm in charge of recruits, coming in. So the coolest part is to make the transformation for them as from nothing, I would say, civilian, if you will, knowing nothing, to soldier. That was our jobs at the end of the day. In between that is all the stuff that people create. Because when you go to drill sergeant school, they don't teach you all those things that you may have gone through when you first came in the military in boot camp or basic training or whatever. The school itself didn't teach you that. They teach you how to train. They teach you how to teach. A drill and ceremony, basic rifle marksmanship, physical training, all those things to actually train the trainee in. All the other stuff that you see, the theatrics, people pick up on their own, either from the time that they were a recruit or something that they saw that they wanted to be, and they make themselves into that. That's not taught in the school. So with that being said, and what you've seen, what you know, people are pretty good actors. It's very compelling, and the trainees fall into it and believe it and all those things. And then at the end of the day, they take their hat off and it's kind of a normal person. So that's what we become because it gets the job done. I remember one story. So I trained females for 1 year and trained males for a year. Actually, the males are first, then the females. And I remember, so the females, the only difference really is their strength, and more importantly, their upper body strength between the males and the females. And the females are smarter. The males aren't as smart at all when you compare it to. But that upper body strength or that strength that they lack, you have to build that from day one. Like you're picking them up from the reception station, and you bring them into your platoon. You may get your whole platoon filled that day. You may only get 4 or 5, and then you're building it throughout the week until you get your part that's going to fill up the platoon. Like the whole company may get 200, then it's, broken down over those 4 platoons, if you will. But day one, when they walk in the door, we're giving them a grenade body and start throwing that grenade because of their upper, their upper strength is so weak. Some of them will throw it 3 feet, and you may get an athlete that may throw it 10, 15, 20. I remember I had this one girl, she's throwing it farther than the guy. I was like, whoa. So, but you have to build it up, day 0. So that come time for that, and they're basically trained and they're being tested for the grenades and everything, they can actually throw it. Because when they throw that live grenade, you want to go more than 3 feet. That's a lot heavier. So that's one of the differences in training them. I remember, and even the drill sergeant gets confused because sometimes you can graduate them on a Friday morning and then pick up your next platoon and start picking up people from your next platoon that afternoon. So you've taken them from, 0 to 100 mile an hour, if you will, in terms of graduation, and then you're starting over at 0. And you forget in your mind that you have to start over. And what you're telling them, they have no idea what you're talking about, that you got to start over, right? So when you give them certain orders or whatever, like, oh, what's he talking about? Oh, shoot, that was the last group. So you have to remember that. So you would tell the group, they would learn after a while when you tell them to do push-ups, like you're doing 25 and you just get up. I say you get down and drop. You're only doing 25 and getting up. You're not doing, a big number unless I tell you to do a big number. So in most cases, this as a theme or rule, like you're doing push-ups before you go into the dining facility, right? And I remember having this group do push-ups, and one of them or a few females wasn't doing them correctly or whatever the case may be. Maybe I was just being a butthole, but they had to stay out there and do push-ups. And I probably said something like, you do push-ups until I get tired. Oh, that's a pretty long time, right? Especially when I'm not doing anything. So I went inside the dining facility. They're still outside doing push-ups. And I'm eating last, letting them get their food first. And I get my food and I sit down, and this drill sergeant says, you still got people out there doing push-ups. I'm like, oh, shoot. I jump up. Sorry, I got it. I took care of it. They've already gotten their food early because I, forgot all about it. So you'll say stuff like that and then forget. So especially if you are by yourself as a drill sergeant, doesn't have, a 2-man team, if you will. Because sometimes it was like that. So you get those types of stories. But like I said, the females are much smarter and you can train them to do a whole bunch of stuff. I had them doing U.S. Army drill team stuff with their rifles, but that the males could not do. After being a drill sergeant for 2 years, I was assigned to Korea. And because I had been a drill sergeant, my records were kind of highlighted and flagged to go to this special unit called JSA, excuse me, which is the Joint Security Area, right in the DMZ. And they wanted the best of the best in terms of soldiers, if you will. So I was assigned up there, where I spent a year. But I was there for probably, I think I got there in July, so probably about 5 months or so. We're doing our normal routine of what we do. So there's 4 platoons that are up there. One is off, one is QRF, one is in the JSA, and one is doing training, and you just did that rotation. In the rotation, we would flip sometimes. It would be 2 days at a time, and then it would be 4 days at a time. So we're on our rotation. We're up north. North was in the JSA itself. So if you turn on your television, you see those peace talks. That's where the JSA is. They're happening. Those peace talks are happening in the JSA. Those buildings in the JSA, they are half of the buildings on the north side, half the buildings on the south side. Inside the building itself, where they actually hold the talks, there's microphones that face the north and face the south. Right in the middle of the table, there's wires on the table. That line of wires on the table represent the north and the south. So when the south side is having tours in the JSA, our guards will go in and lock the door from the north side so people can't come in from the north. And, it had this agreement where they wouldn't try to, but you still lock the door, and vice versa. If the north had a tour, they'd come in and lock the door from the south. So that's how everything was kind of made up. Our platoon was unique in that in a 39 infantry platoon, so half of them were GIs and half were Korean soldiers. They called them Katusas, which is Korean augmented to the United States Army. Now, these Korean soldiers were kind of the entitled, if you will, like their family had money and all those types of things, so they were able to be Katusas versus serving the ROK Army, the Republic of Korea Army. So our platoon is half and half. So half my squad is I'm a squad leader now, staff sergeant. I have a sergeant team leader, U.S., and then I have a sergeant team leader, Korean. So he was in charge of the Korean guys in the squad, and the GI was in charge of the GIs in the squad. That's what made up our squad and our platoon. So this one particular time, we were up north in the JSA, and happened to be Thanksgiving Day, and there's no tours during the holidays. So it means your guards are not let down by any means, but you're not going to be out there on a cordon like you would if there was a tour. So I had the third shift, which means my time didn't start till midnight. We just get out of this meeting, a platoon sergeant's meeting, so it's a squad leader, platoon sergeant, platoon leader, and we hear a gunshot. It sounded like someone knocking on a door, a hammer hitting wood. And we have automatic weapons in the JSA. They have automatic weapons in the JSA. Even though we bought them in undercover, we knew that they had them and they knew we had them. So they all start coming out after there's a gunshot. And next thing you know, we have all our ammo, our weapons, like come as you are. I had on BDU pants and a sweatshirt, and that was it. So now my helmet and all my gear, and there's bullets flying back and forth from us to them. But as the bullets are flying, we're fighting against the KPA, Korean People's Army, and they're on our side. And that's where this firefight is happening. Our particular area in the JSA was kind of, I would say, low ground. They were on some higher ground, but not high enough where they could shoot down at us. They could only shoot level, and the rounds just kind of went, well above our head. As well, because we're in lower ground, we couldn't get an advantage point where our rounds could go up and over to where they are. It's kind of like this, and you couldn't breach it with rounds. Me and my team leader go upstairs into our building, which is 2 levels, and knock out a window, and because his team leader has an M203. So make the decision he's going to launch grenades over to where they are. Don't know exactly where they are, but we're going to launch grenades where we think they are. And so we knock out the window. First thing, the only thing I tell them is don't hit the tree. So it's November, there's no leaves on the tree, but where this tree was, our guys are right below that. And if he hits this tree and deflects the round, it could drop down to where they are. So that was the only instruction, right? So first shot, it deflects off the limbs of the tree. Now it goes forward, thankfully, within explosions. I remember hitting him, pow, upside the head, upside his helmet. That's the thing I said not to do. So he fires again. You hear the explosion and you hear yelling. Okay, there you are. Fire for effect. Shoot the round back over there again. Second one, more yelling. That neutralized the firefight right there. So what had happened was, like I said, they have tours. So we didn't have any because of Thanksgiving on the U.S. side. But on the North side, they had a tour. So there was the guard, and there was 2 people out there, 2 people on the tour. One of them had his back to the south, and standing beside the guard who had his back to the south, and his buddy, or the person who was on the tour with him, took a picture. As that person was taking a picture, the guy in the picture turns around and runs across the line to the south and just keeps running along the road. The guard chases after him, starts firing. that's what started the firefight. In the end, the person who ran across the line, what was Chinese, he had planned this to defect from China, communist, for 2 years. And that was his method of doing it. He was going to go to North Korea, go to the JSA, and just defect across the line. So that's what started the firefight. In the end, I told you our platoon was mixed of GIs and Katusas. One of the Katusas got killed. When the bullets started flying, excuse me, I told you they were on the high ground, we were on the low ground, but behind that low ground was an old helipad, and he ran into that helipad, and that put him higher than us and even higher than them. Bullets already flying high. Caught one right in the cheek, killed him. The GI that was with him had a, kind of fatty neck, if you will, and it kind of went right straight through. That was our casualties, and then 5 of them were killed and 3 were severely wounded. So it's one of those attacks, again, happened in 1984 that it made the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal. And, but if you didn't see that, you never know that happened. So I leave Korea. Before I leave Korea, I would just say that there was always propaganda being publicized over a loudspeaker in the DMZ as a whole. We couldn't understand it, but our Korean soldiers could understand it. So they're like, we're going to come get you tonight, all kinds of stuff. You just got to kind of deflect it. I remember having this vantage point to their building. And if you haven't seen their building, it's called a GOC. If you ever watch, there's a 007 movie with Pierce Bronson where in the beginning, there's an exchange between a Korean guy and someone else or whatever, and they cross the border or whatever, but they show the building, the GOC in there. So if you ever want to see what the GOC looks like without going to North Korea, just got to look up that movie. But I remember you could see parts of the road from Pyongyang, and it's a long road that travels all the way up to the GOC. And there were just trucks and trucks and trucks being transported, offloading, like I could think of a FedEx truck or a UPS truck, that type of truck, and just soldiers piling out of it and going into the GOC right after the attack. And I had this vantage point that I could look and see where the truck would stop in back of the GOC, and all these people get out. I go, oh hell, we're in for it. But nothing else ever happened, thankfully. In between that, I left Korea. I went to I was assigned to the old guard. A guy that was in Korea with me had been at the old guard and influenced me to come there. So I went to the old guard. Then eventually was selected for the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, where I was a relief commander, and then later a sergeant of the guard. So I tell people that was people always ask about that duty and how it was, and the strictness of it and all those types of things. Man, what's strict. You got to be on your P's and Q's. But I call that the best duty in the Army, because you're guarding the Tomb of the Unknowns, and doesn't get higher than that. So that's the reason for that. I think probably the world holds it. Yeah, I guess we all equally hold it in high regard, no doubt about that. But it's all to guard the unknowns. So I'll call it the best duty of my career. I would say best duty in the Army. Much like the JSA, if you will, in terms of it's only one platoon, but the three squads, and the squads are arranged by height. So I'm 5'10", and that was the third relief. People are 5'10" to 6 foot. And then the second relief is, taller than 6 foot. They may go up to 6'4". And then the first relief is 6'4" and above. And it would be kind of spread out based on their height. I may get a guy that's 6'1" on my relief if the other reliefs are taller. So that was the makeup of the platoon itself. That rotation would change sometimes as well, but usually a day on, day off train. Day on, day off train was the rotation. And it would change sometimes. Or you might spend day on, day off, day on, day off, then train, then something else. They kind of explored with it a few times. So, but obviously on your day on, you're showing up for work. You leave the relief that's on. Now nighttime hours when the cemetery closes. So from October 1st through March 31st, then the guard is up there for an hour. And then April 1st to September 30th, they're up there for a half hour. So the warmer months, they're up there less time. And the colder months, they're up there for a long time. So that's really the makeup of it. You have a relief commander, which is a staff sergeant, and then you have probably an assistant relief commander, and then you have everyone else that are sentinels. So pretty much an infantry squad makeup, depending on manpower. I remember my time as a relief commander, I didn't have 9 people in my squad. I probably had 4 aside from myself, sometimes 5. And so the relief commander's job is to change the guard. That's the guy that's out there that's saying, ladies and gentlemen, have your attention, please. The ceremony you're about to witness is the changing of the guard. That's the one kind of doing all the talking, and that's the one doing the inspection. But that's the job of the relief commander. And the sentinel's job is to walk. So I was trained as a relief commander, not to walk. But after I got my badge, then I taught myself how to walk. Because one guy said to me one time, one of my soldiers, I was telling him to do some adjustment or correction, whatever. And his response was, well, Sergeant, you don't know because you don't walk. It's like, okay, you got a point there. I don't walk. You're going to do what I said first. But point taken, all right? So I taught myself to walk because I knew what I was talking about, what was right. And again, he was going to do it. But just to, like everything else we do in the military, as you go from private to whatever rank, you've gone through those same things. So you're speaking from experience of having done it. So when you tell people to do it, you've done it. So we get to create that statement. I won't ask you to do anything that I haven't already done or I'm doing. But that particular thing, I had not. So he was right in that regard. I didn't know based on experience of walking. I knew based on what I saw, and made the correction and all that type of stuff. Okay, but I'm going to fix that other part. So I taught myself how to walk. So that way I would never hear that comment again. But it's consistent with everything we do in the Army. As we move up, we've done it before. So we can set the example because we've been that example. We've already done it. So the significance of the Tomb of Unknown Soldier is that from the wars or conflicts that it represents, someone was killed and their remains cannot be identified. So therefore they're unknown. And that process is pretty in-depth in terms of identification, or in this case, the lack thereof, to where what's left of remains, it is tested. Don't ask me what process they go through, but in a manner that if anything that's there that is identifiable through any level of testing that exists, if they can be identified, then they don't meet that criteria. So there's one from each one of those conflicts where in that case, they just were unidentifiable. So it is that reverence, if you will, that is held in high regard and respected around the world. So you can, I would guess, just imagine the honor that it is to be the person selected to guard them. So going on from there, I was assigned to Hawaii. And while in Hawaii, I'm a first sergeant now, and then we actually deployed to Haiti for Operation Uphold Democracy, which is pretty interesting there. Left Hawaii and then worked in the Ranger Department, Ranger Training Brigade, 6th Ranger Battalion, where that's the Florida phase of Ranger School. So again, going from trainee to drill sergeant and then Ranger student years later, Ranger Instructor is pretty unique. Now you're on the other side of it. So you make decisions based on being the instructor versus being, the student. And you have to make a decision about, okay, do I want them to go through what I went through, or am I a little older and know the difference here of training value versus just being a butthole. And I chose training value more than being a butthole. I could be a butthole during the training value, but I thought it was more important to have a training value for these people that are going to be leaders in the Army. So that was pretty fun and unique because the tables flip, in a different way. So it's pretty cool and unique experience. This is what I would do as an instructor. I'm senior as well, so invoking that whole level of you're more senior at this, you're better at this than you were when you started, if you will. I treated them, that way. And again, I'm thinking about training value at the same time of implementing this script of how we grade or how it's graded, right? And so what I wouldn't do is in some way an instructor would do this, different ranks, different level of maturity, and however they wanted to do it, but I wouldn't allow the Ranger student to walk 4 or 5 kilometers in the wrong direction just to tell them in the end that you went the wrong way. Like when they start going in the wrong way, like, platoon leader, stop. Like, what's going on? What are we doing? Well, I'm going to, are you sure? Or something like that to prompt them to bring other people in to help you with this decision-making process to make sure you're doing the right thing. What is the map telling you to go the right way, etc. Because if you go 5 kilometers the wrong way, I had to walk 5 kilometers the wrong way. Again, in the end, just to say you went the wrong way. And you failed the patrol. But they can fail the patrol. Because they didn't know where to go and someone else stepped in and said, okay, you go this way, depending on what they're telling them to do and all that type of stuff, and them listening or whatever, they still failed the patrol. Someone else led this, you didn't. You were in charge, but they took charge from you. But it's your grade, not their grade. So I can still do the same thing. Or like in a real platoon or in a real situation going on, as a platoon sergeant, if you will, I'm not going to allow my platoon to go the wrong way. So I'm going to step in and say, wait a minute, let's check this out. But the student might not do that. So you have to invoke that process. But my point is, the level of maturity for me wouldn't allow me to let them go the wrong way, just so you went the wrong way. But others would just let them walk. So, it's just from Ranger instructor to Ranger instructor. But that's why I did it, because I thought that provided more training value. And like in a real platoon, like I said, other people would come in and say, hey, I'm seeing this, you're seeing that. Just because they're the platoon leader and by rank, but first of all, they're all students here. They're all students, right? So, but they might not jump in and say something just because they know they're not in charge and they don't want to take over the thing. But if the Ranger instructor kind of inserts that process, then, it's okay. So after my assignment in the Ranger Department, I was selected for Sergeant Major. So I go to Sergeant Major's Academy 4 year, Fort Bliss, Texas. And then after that assignment, I'm assigned 101st Airborne Division in 2nd 327 No Slack. So I spent 3 years as a battalion sergeant major there, and then moved up to a brigade in the same brigade, 1st Brigade, Bastogne Brigade, as the command sergeant major of the 1st Brigade combat team. So from that particular assignment in 2001, we know what happened in 911. We're all knocking at the door, if you will, to do our part to protect our country. We were not called upon, our particular unit wasn't called upon to go to Afghanistan to do that part, but later called upon to go to Iraq. So now fast forward, we're in 2003. It's February, right at the end of February, we start deploying as a brigade combat team and a whole 101st Airborne Division to Kuwait. And Kuwait becomes our intermediate staging base for, as we prepare to invade Iraq. So we get there late February, part of March, first few days of March. And our particular camp was Camp Pennsylvania. So the whole 101st Airborne Division was on Camp Pennsylvania. That's 1st Brigade was on Camp Pennsylvania. Then 2nd and 3rd Brigade were either on Camp New Jersey or Camp New York. And they're all kind of close proximity to one another. 5-10 kilometers at least. So we had been there about 20 days or so, 22, 23 days. And on this particular day, the last word is that we were going to invade Iraq on a Thursday. This is a Saturday. So 5 days from that point, whatever the math is, 5 or 6 days, on that Thursday is when we were going to do our part to invade Iraq. 2 days prior is when they had shock and awe. I call it bombs on Baghdad, when we bombed Baghdad looking for Saddam. So bam, the war started at that particular point. Although we had not put ground troops on the ground. So this is a Saturday. We put the final touches on our order, our particular part. So it was kind of not a rah-rah celebratory moment, but an exhale that part's finally done. We're just waiting for our order to cross the border. And my plan for that evening was our ammo just came in, so my driver brought me my ammo. I was going to load ammo in my tent where I slept with the commander and the executive officer. We had a television in our tent. So I found out how to get American golf, and I'm watching Tiger Woods play golf in what was then it's called Arnold Palmer Invitational now. I forget what it was called then, off the top of my head. So my plan that night was to load ammo, watch golf, and I was on my computer setting up bill pay. So in our tent, again, myself, the commander, and the executive officer slept there. The next tent over was the major tent. The next tent over was the captain's tent. Next tent over was the senior NCOs that was assigned to the headquarters brigade. On our camp, that was about, I tell people, 10 football fields. It was massive. We have about 5,000 people on our camp. Approximately 4,200 of them were in the 1st Brigade Combat Team. The other 800 was from a combat support unit that was housed there. So imagine the headquarters in the middle of this massive camp, and maybe there's 130-some people in the headquarters total, maybe a little less, and the rest of those soldiers on the camp kind of being in a perimeter, if you will, around the headquarters. The camp had 12-foot dirt berms on the outside with concertina wire at the top. I forget how many guard posts, but the guard posts were throughout the camp. They're spread pretty far apart, 150 meters or so. So anyone trying to infiltrate the camp, they'd have to come up those berms or front gate if they dared. So I couldn't imagine someone trying to scale that dirt berm because you would just sink before you even got to the top. If someone didn't pick you off, before that even. So that's the makeup of the camp. So this particular night, I'm sitting at a table. I'm loading ammunition. I'm watching Tiger Woods play golf. The tent flap would kind of blow because of the wind, which is probably about 4 feet is to my right. Television is about 5 feet in front of me. The tent's wall is another foot in front of that. I'm sitting right at the end of this table. So the flap would move. I remember when I first did it, I kind of looked over at it, realized it was the wind, disregarded after that. So it did it again. When it did it the second time, I ain't paying attention. But right after that, I noticed an object that was sparking. So I said, we're in the land of not quite right, and that's a not quite right grenade that's sparking before it explodes. I jump up immediately, run to the back of the tent to wake up the commander who was asleep. So he went to sleep about 2,200 hours. It's about 01 the next day. So now it's March 23rd. The executive officer was on the other side of the table, and he could see what I saw, so I knew he could take care of himself. But the commander was asleep, had no idea what was going on. So I go to the back of the tent to wake him up. Say, hey, there's a grenade about to go off up front. You got to get out of here. Of course, he's, what's going on? Get up, get your boots on, we got to go. So he gets, does all that, gets his boots on and everything. I said, I'm going to count to 3 and we're going to run down the middle of the tent. So the tent had 2 exits built into the tent, if you will. But the rear exit of where he slept was all roped up because there's a temper tent that had an air conditioner heating unit that was in the back of that. So it was all worked up. That way you have to navigate the air conditioning unit, if you will. So the exit was only one exit that operable, if you will. So from where I was standing in the back of the tent, I was on the left side, he was on my right, and I lined us up in the middle of the tent so we could run straight down with no obstacles. And that grenade that came in that was sparking was on this left side. So I counted 3, we start running. And I'm running like this as if that's going to protect me from a grenade blast, and just keep running until I get outside. I get outside and he's not there. So I'm calling for him in hushed tones, not to silhouette myself. So, sir. And there's no response. And then I hear a gunshot. And I know that after that gunshot, I hear a yell. And I know that yell, I know it's the XO. I just knew it was the XO. And I pull out my weapon and I cock it. Now I have a magazine in my weapon, but I don't have ammo in my weapon. All my ammo is on the table. And so you have the magazine in with no ammo, you try to cock it, the bolt just stays to the rear, as opposed to ammo being in there, goes chaining around. Well, that didn't happen. So I have a weapon with no ammo. So you heard the saying, don't bring a knife to a gunfight. Well, a weapon with no ammo is just as useless. So I know the TOC's behind me, about 25 yards. I turn around and run to the TOC to get ammo and a weapon and nod so I can see. So as I'm coming in, by now they've heard a gunshot. So, something's going on outside. While I tell them I need the ammo and the nods and the weapon. So someone's running to get that. I place people in security positions around the TOC of every interest. The guys at that one door, the main door, have them down in the prone. I finally get the ammo and stuff, go out of the tent. I tell these guys before I leave, I said, the running password is, it's the Sergeant Major, so don't shoot. That's how I was going to get myself back into the tent if I needed to. So I'll go out with those items and go to my tent and look for the commander and XO. So I get to my tent and they're not there. Now it's eerie outside, it's pitch dark. There had been a generator light set that illuminated our area, but that wasn't on. I didn't really pay any attention to the fact that it was even off. I just knew it was dark. And I needed nods to see, but the nods they worked, but you need a sliver of a star and there was none. So they was useless. So I had to use my night vision, just my eyes to identify things. So I go to my tent and they're not there. Now I'm calling for them in hushed tones, not to silhouette myself, but there's no one outside. Now this thing happened, but it's just silence. I go back to the TOC. I get someone and tell them, go to my tent, look for the commander XO while I look for the enemy. Enemy's out there someplace who committed this attack. At least that initial part of it. So when I come out this time, I'm challenged. Someone says, "Halt, who's there?" All those things. And I recognize the voice. I say it's the Sergeant Major. They say, "Sergeant Major, what's going on? What happened?" So I have no idea. I said, XO's been shot. They said, "Well, so has Captain Seaford." So the time it took me going to the tent, the first time, a frag grenade had gone off in my tent. Frag grenade had gone off in the second tent, and a frag grenade had gone off in the third tent, and someone else was shot. Now, it's something I can't explain. Some doctor has to tell you all this, but what adrenaline does to where I couldn't hear those explosions. Now, grenade's pretty loud, so I can't explain why I didn't hear any of them, but I didn't hear any of them. So I'm out there, and he tells me that another person has been shot. Before I came out that second time, because when I went out the first time to look for them, there was no one out there. I call on the radio for reinforcements. I call this one battalion. That battalion I had been in some reason, that's the first thing that popped into my mind. I'm not sure if they were the closest one in proximity of where we were and where they were, but that's who I made the call to and said, hey, we need a platoon over here to look for the enemy. So while that platoon of soldiers is en route to our location, which is about 300 meters across our camp, as I was leaving the tent, a medic got on the radio and said, do you need an FLA, field litter ambulance? Well, I knew one person was shot, so I said yes. Sent it in the vicinity of the TOC. So that happens before I go out. But now, that second time when I go out, people are starting to come, out of their tents and they're moving in security positions. I'm moving them to certain places to be in security positions. There's bunkers there. The alarms going off of a scud alert just because there's been, gunfire and explosions. Not an actual scud. But people are moving to the bunkers as per, our drill when the alarm goes off. So now we got people moving all over the place. Then we begin to evaluate casualties. We have casualties in the second tent. So you have to remember they heard a gunshot, then they heard an explosion, so they began to get up. A frag grenade explodes at a 15-degree radius. So if you're below 15 degrees, you're probably okay. I'd probably say I would go as far as 12. If you're at 12 or below, you're probably okay. If you're above that, you're in jeopardy. You're going to catch shrapnel. The higher you are, the more you're going to catch as those flying razor blades just start taking off. So we get in a second tent because they had heard a gunshot and explosion. They began to stand up. So a couple of them got it pretty good. One of them ended up with 83 grenade shrapnel holes in his body. The next tent, the third tent, now they've heard a gunshot, an explosion, and an explosion. And they had enough early warning where some of them had begun to come out of the tent. One person was on his way out, forgot his ammo, had to go back into the tent. He slept all the way in the back, got his ammo, and then when he tried to come out of the tent, that grenade exploded in that particular tent, and he was 17 inches away from the grenade. So we have casualties in all three tents, but the worst of the casualties are in the second tent. So that became our casualties collection point. So we're moving them from tent 3 to tent 2, or the vicinity of tent 2, at least right outside of it, as we treat them and load them on the FLA to get them over to the aid stations onto the camp. So all this is happening simultaneously. We're looking for the enemy, of which we have no signs of. Like there's no remnants of anything that says insurgents. So I say something had to have changed on this camp. Like something changed overnight. We've been here for 20 plus nights and nothing like this. There wasn't a breeze. There was nothing. Something changed. And then I'm told that interpreters that came in the night before, bam, has to be them, go find them. We find the interpreters. They're apprehended. They're flex cuffed. They're on sitting down, weapons pointing at their heads. We finally get them into a room and interrogate them just to learn that they have nothing to do with it. So now we're back to square one of the insurgents that, again, no sign of. At some point in there, I'm blaming the guards. Like, how in the hell did insurgents get into our camp in the first place? I'd gone out to check on the guards a few nights, and they were doing all the right things. Again, couldn't find it perceivable for anybody to even make it up those dirt berms. So how'd they get in? And then how'd they get out without leaving a sign? And I'm thinking that if they can come in here, create all this devastation, and get out without a sign, like we are really in for it when we cross that border and go into Iraq. Our intel has totally underestimated how good they are. It is going to be a fight when we finally cross that berm and go into Iraq. As our casualties are loaded onto the FLA, and FLA moves over to the aid station, they're treated in there to be medevaced to Combat Support Hospital, or CASH. Helicopter lands. The first group's loaded on the helicopter. Helicopter takes off for a 1-minute flight to the combat sport hospital. I mean, it's that close. Second helicopter lands. As it's in the process of being loaded, there's a huge explosion in the sky. I mean, the whole sky just lights up, huge fireball. We don't know what it is. We just know there's a big fireball. First thing we think is that it's a coordinated attack. They're attacking us on the ground. Now they're attacking us in the air. As that second medevac helicopter is loaded, they're told before they take off that you can't take that 1 minute flight to the cache. It's just a minute away. You have to go to a different cache that's 75 kilometers away. Just because of that explosion. By that diversion, arguably cost one of our guys his life. What happened with the explosion was, again, you got gunshots happening on the ground, you have explosions happening on the ground. The Patriot battery detects this fast-moving object in the sky and believe it to be a Scud missile. But it was actually a British Tornado fighter jet returning from a mission. So now we have a friendly fire incident. And no, they didn't survive. But we're still looking for insurgents. By this time, our commander was concussed from the grenade a different grenade that came into our tent that was a frag grenade. Got 2 pieces of shrapnel in his arm. He comes out of a little concussed state and says we need to get accountability of our personnel. So as we do that, make a call on the radio, get accountability, we learn that one person is missing, so are grenades and ammunition. And his name is Sergeant Akbar. So now Akbar becomes our number 1 suspect. And I probably failed to mention that I guess I did, that the interpreters were interrogated and they had nothing to do with it. So Akbar is our number 1 suspect. And me and the intel officer, once hearing this, okay, it's one of our own people. So how are we going to find them on this camp of 5,000 people where everyone dressed the same? It's dark and massive. He and I come out of the tent at the same time. He had been going around all night, going to different bunkers, checking on people, asking them how they're doing, kind of giving them some instructions. He moved to the next and do the same thing. Walk around with his pistol in his hand all night. So we come out of the tent at the same time. I go one way to tell our leadership of what we're looking for. And he realized that there's a bunker he hadn't gone to all night, so he goes to that bunker. As I'm telling our leadership of what we're looking for, obviously they're in disbelief, like, Sergeant Major, you mean looking for one of our own? Yes, we're looking for one of our own. He's wearing the same thing we're wearing, likely. So it's almost like good luck, find him. Now he's in one of our subordinate units of these 4,200 people. And maybe a couple of people in the headquarters knew what he looked like, could identify him. Everyone else had no idea. Hadn't heard the name before, hadn't seen the face before. The intel officer walks to his bunker. Again, he'd been walking around with his pistol all night. And as he approached bunkers all night, he asks, who's in the bunker? Like, who's there? So when he says that, the response is Sergeant Akbar. So Akbar doesn't know we're looking for him. And there's another person in the bunker, and that person responds to who they are. So the intel officer holsters his weapon, walks closer to the bunker, gets behind Akbar and takes him down. And that's how Akbar is apprehended. So you think about this, even as a suspect, that committing an attack like this, and then going in a bunker with a fellow soldier, that what you commit an attack against fellow soldiers, but now you have one right beside you and you do nothing. Of course, the soldier doesn't know who's right beside him. The other soldier doesn't know Akbar's. The attacker this, that he committed this, and that you're in the bunker with him, just you and him. I think something turns someone on in an attack like this, and something turns them off. Like all the attacks that happen could always be much worse. Yeah, we'll get into that. So he's taken down, apprehended, flex cuffed. I had been walking around again with someone's in for. I don't really know whose it was. And ammo and everything, but I didn't have any gear on. So once he's apprehended, I go to my tent and get my gear. And so I have my flashlight on as I'm getting close to my tent. The generator lights had finally been restored. I'm using my little light to illuminate my entrance coming in. I notice a piece of brass by my tent, and I'm figuring that piece of brass has to be the brass that was expended from the XO being shot. I go in my tent, I see that from that incendiary grenade, that first grenade that came in was sparking was actually an incendiary grenade because the whole front side had been burnt out and it's still smoking. Our colors, the command sergeant major is the custodian for the unit colors, which is the brigade colors, the regimental colors, and the U.S. colors are all burnt up. That's the first thing I see. So I take a big swallow from that, like, that's bad. Then I look and see that the frag grenade that exploded in the tent exploded where I slept. So I see where this thing called a bivy sack and my mat pad, a locker I had, a field tip is all full of shrapnel. Just like my bivy sack is Swiss cheese. It comes over you real quick that had I been asleep and not watching Tiger Woods play golf, then I'd be dead. I wouldn't be sitting here doing this interview at all. So now I'm pissed. It's eye for an eye. Like that. Try to kill me. Not to mention that we have a host of people, injured already. And that's personal, but now it's more personal because it's me. And those guys are evacuated, might not be able to do something about it, but I can, and I am. So I'm fuming, and I'm going to go back out of this tent. I'm going to do something to him. I don't know what it is yet. So I march out of there over to where he is, and as I get closer, probably from 5 feet from me to you, someone else is coming from the flank, trying to get to him. Why'd you do this? Why'd you hurt my friends? So I spend my time holding him back, and I don't get to do whatever I thought I was going to do. I don't know. I have no idea what it was. But it's all foil because I'm spending my time holding somebody else back. So probably a good thing. So he's apprehended. I remember after they supposedly checked him, they stood him up, and then there's this knife on 550 cord dangling from him. And I'm pulling that off of his belt loop, and it pops, the belt loop pops. And I'm cursing at the guys who did the, inspected him because they missed it. So that's happening. They say, Sergeant Major, here's his weapon. Do you want it? I said, well, give me that. I take it. I smell it. See if it's been recently fired. I put it on safe. I did not clear it. Now, normally we take a weapon and the first thing we do is clear it, right? Well, I didn't do that because I knew that if this weapon fired the same shot and left that brass that was by my tent, then they would match. The numbers on the back of the rounds would match. Those DOTA would match. So that's why I didn't clear it. And when I smelled it, it had been recently fired. I took the weapon back over near my tent and that piece of brass, and I put someone there to guard it and said, don't leave until you are not relieved until I relieve you. Like no one else can relieve you. Then came back over. They had moved Akbar to a different area, and he was asked, why he did it. Did you do this? Why'd you do it? And I remember his response because you had to take a pause. He said, to keep y'all from killing our women and raping our children. Oh, you are. And I'm thinking real quick, like, who's our? Like, we're all over here. We took the same oath. We got the same uniform on. Who the hell's our? It didn't resonate with me that his last name being Akbar meant that, his religion was Muslim, and that was the hour that these Muslim people, that was the hour that he was referring to. So it blew the whole oath out the window of, protecting against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So CID finally showed up, and he was, taken away and all that. We kind of picked up our pieces, if you will, to kind of move on. We learned that one person had died from the attack. By the time it's daylight, we went to the local combat sport hospital to see some of the guys that were taken there. And they were kind of doing fine. Some had gone into surgery or in surgery. Some were waiting to go into surgery. Our commander, and then we took some walking wounded over there as well. The attack left 13 that ended up being wounded. 2 days after that, the person that was had 83 grenade shrapnel holes in his body ended up succumbing to those wounds. So in the end, it was 2 dead and 13 wounded. Captain Christopher Seaver, United States Army, and Major Gregory Stone, United States Air Force. Captain Seaver, we knew right away that morning. We actually received, so now it's early Sunday morning. Our timeline to invade Iraq for us moved up to that Tuesday instead of Thursday. So the next morning, again, Sunday morning, we learned that. The next morning, Monday morning, we have a memorial service for Captain Seaver. And then the next morning, Tuesday morning, is when we LD to cross the border into Iraq. So that happened pretty quickly. And while we were doing our GAC to move into Iraq, we learned that Major Stone had died of wounds. So we paused. We learned that when we were, stopped at camp overnight, if you will. We learned it then. So we paused and had a short, long prayer and memorial service, if you will, for him. 2 years later at the trial, so this happened in 2003, the trial didn't happen until about 25 months later in April of 2005. So we learned during the trial that he had kept a diary. So he wrote many anti-American things in his diary, which I'll share here. And I'm reading it because they are his quotes in his diary and his words, and I don't want to mess those up. So exactly, he says, in 1993, I do not like the military. They have too much control over people's lives. I suppose I am just anti-government. A Muslim should see himself as a Muslim only. His loyalty should be to Islam only. Now, I'll say this. Bart Womack says this, that religion doesn't pull a trigger. People pull a trigger. Now, they can leverage whatever they want to, ideology or otherwise, to account for why they're doing what they're doing, but the religion doesn't pull the trigger. 1996, anyone who stands in front of me shall be considered the enemy and dealt with accordingly. So now it's beginning to escalate. 1996, destroying America was my plan as a child and as a juvenile and in college. My life will not be complete unless America is destroyed. Destroying America is my greatest goal. 1998, he joins the Army. So this was planned all along. This night, this happened to be his opportunity to do what he had planned. February 1993, he writes, so again, this happens in March, so February, right before we deploy, I'm not going to do anything as long as I stay here in the United States. But as soon as I am in Iraq, I'm going to try to kill as many of them as possible. So he just executed his plan. Unbeknownst to us. Now we were, I call this the proximity illusion. We were in total belief of the proximity illusion, in that the closer you are to it, the more you think it's not going to happen. We were in full belief to the proximity illusion that says, that took that oath, that wore that uniform, that I support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That was the proximity illusion that we bought into. and it backfired. So you learn very quickly that didn't work. It's not for everybody. There's rogues in every organization. I came up with this quote as a takeaway: that no profession, level of education, ideology, or religion is above reproach. There is no profile. The insider threat is closer than you think. We got fooled by the profession. And then the ideology took over. But the point is, it don't even matter. Once we start profiling, we think that, an attacker is going to commit something like this has to look like and be like those of 911, then we get fooled by a person who took the same oath that we did. And so as a result of these statements, you would think, and obviously laid out, being premeditated, that he was convicted and guilty of the attack. So I think the charges were guilty of premeditated, two counts of premeditated murder and 3 counts of attempted premeditated murder. And again, found guilty and sentenced to death. So he now sits in the U.S. disciplinary barracks at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. Now, I'll note, although on death row, no one's been executed since 1961. So you make the call of when and if it's going to happen. This is what happened, I would say, immediately after. So again, we had that morning after the attack. Of course, it happened at 01, so later in the morning, 9 a.m.-ish or whatever. We returned from visiting our those that were in the hospital and are walking wounded being treated. I remember later on that day, as CID was doing their investigation, they wanted us to take everything out of the tents that had been attacked. And in doing so, everything was out, and people were just kind of sitting along this wall. But the look on their face, it was like they were obviously devastated. And I knew they needed to agree, but the look on their face to me said, this unit cannot cross the border and go fight a war. That time it was still crossing the border on a Thursday. Hadn't been told they was moving up. But they weren't ready. Like this was on their mind. And rightfully so. I mean, in every incident like this, people need to grieve. But what I saw needed to change quickly. So I said, everybody get up, get out of here. I don't care where you go. I know you need to grieve. It's a big camp. Go someplace else and do that someplace else. You're not going to do it here. So they all got up and they left. I never thought that I was being callous. I wanted to get them back in the mindset that, hello, the war, our part hadn't even started yet. We haven't even crossed. This isn't the enemy. This isn't the enemy that we know about. It ended up being one, but that ain't why we came here. We got a bigger thing to deal with. That was the message. So the best thing that happened to us was that timeline moved up. Instead of being 4 or 5 days away, that ended up being, 50 some hours after the attack that we were moving out. People say you put stuff in your rear view mirror. We needed this in our rear view mirror, and it got there quickly, but we needed that. And ironically, no one talked about this attack. A year in Iraq, no one ever said anything. Don't ask me why. It's just, I never heard anyone say anything. Now, what did it happen in places that I wasn't around? I don't know, but I never heard anything. That next night, I felt my duty to finish watching golf. So I did that. That was the final round. I remember staying up to watch that. I think I probably got from the time, again, you wake up Saturday morning, attack happens early Sunday, so you got that whole day. Up that whole day. I probably went, then I'm up that next night. I don't think I went to bed about 05. Now it's Monday morning, just to get up at 07 for our memorial service at 08. So I'm starting the war like no sleep. But that next night, When Captain Seaver got shot, he got shot point blank in the back. And one of the NCOs that came out of the NCO tent that was right beside it, and like he had fell down right as soon as the guy was coming out of the tent. And then he saw a figure just run off into the dark. Now we know that to be Akbar now. But he also said that he thought he saw someone else. He thought he saw two people run. So because of that, and I had known this guy prior to this particular assignment. We had been assigned together in the same unit in Akbar. Even though CID said there was no accomplice, this guy thought he had saw two people. So because of that, I guess in the fact that I was, being asleep versus awake from being killed, I had a platoon of our own soldiers come guard the headquarters that next night. Now, I told you to make it to the camp. Headquarters here, 4,000 plus people around the headquarters. Headquarters in the middle. I have guards guarding the headquarters, obviously with their weapons facing out, but guess who they're facing?
Their own people.
Our own people. I had the mindset, you almost got me once, you ain't gonna get me again. But who am I sending that message to? Oh, I guess everyone else in uniform. Not the one person that might have been accomplice that CID said there was none. And there wasn't none. But that's how fast the trust went out the window. That's how fast this whole oath thing and everyone abiding by the oath, out the window. And those guys are physically challenging anyone that's coming near. They're challenging fellow soldiers with rifles loaded with ammo. So think about this. He came 300 meters across the camp to attack the headquarters. Now what happened, he was on guard that night. The ammo just came during hours of darkness. The commanders had a choice to make to put a guard on the ammo or issue it in the dark, or turn on Humvee headlights or whatever and issue it that way. So different commanders chose differently. In this particular unit, the commander chose to guard it and issue it during daylight. He was on guard. Him and another soldier. Before their shift was over, he told the soldier, if you tell a private, join guard with, and a sergeant tells you, hey, go ahead and go to sleep. I got this. I'll stay on until we leave. But private was going to bed. And that was the case. So as soon as the other guy left, he started on with the ammunition and everything. And that was his opportunity to launch the attack. Now, remember, his statement said, his quote said, as soon as I'm in Iraq, I'm going to try to kill as many of them as possible. Well, he didn't know where we were going to get the ammo. But as soon as we got the ammo, he launched his attack. He could have killed him with more people where he was. There was more of them where he was. But he chose to walk across the camp 300 meters to attack the headquarters. Why? Well, here's why. It's the whole mindset, take out the head, the body will follow. Take out the headquarters, the body will follow. And that worked. Took out parts of the headquarters. The body, the soldiers of the headquarters, were the ones sitting along that wall, all devastated. I mean, I saw it with my own eyes. They were done. That's why I got them out of the area. So that mindset of taking out the headquarters, the body will follow, or take out the head, the body will follow, it works. And like I said, some turns an attacker on, some turns them off. So Akbar immediately went to a bunker where there were other people. And more than just the one when he was finally, taken down. He went to one first, there were more people in there. And that person there, someone took charge of accountability in that bunker and realized they didn't know that person. He was in uniform, so he obviously wasn't a soldier, right? But he didn't necessarily comply with the instructions of the person that was taking charge in that bunker. So he eventually just goes out and goes to another bunker. But think about that. He still had grenades left, not to mention his weapon with ammo in it. He could have easily, because these bunkers are concrete on the sides and the top, with one way in. Then you just had one way in. But it's sand at the bottom, thick sand. He just pulled the pin on a grenade, dropped it, walked out. Boom, all those people in there. That's what I say, something turns them on and something turns them off. It could always be much worse, but he chose not to do that. Then he goes in another bunker, and there's only one person in there. Could have took that dude. That dude had no idea who Akbar was, and Akbar had committed this. Didn't do it. He was his weapon system was an M203. Just like I told you the story in Korea, that 203 was used in its purpose to launch grenades. He could have sat out in the middle of the desert. Boop. We'd have thought that they were mortars coming in. But nope, didn't choose to do that either. When he came to my tent, he threw an incendiary grenade first. I'm sitting at the end of the table, I could see that. Right down there for 5 feet in front of me. He didn't throw an incendiary grenade the rest of the night. He had some. Told me his apprehension, he still had 3 frag grenades left. I want to say 2 incendiary grenades. After incendiary in here, we threw a frag, then a frag, then a frag. I think the incendiary grenade was a mistake. Like he reached in, pulled the pin, threw it in. There wasn't a boom. Like, gosh, frag, frag, frag. Had that first grenade been a frag, I would not have seen sparks. Then I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you. Told you 15-degree radius, it blew that table up and me with it. There was a not believable, I'm sorry somewhere. Yeah. I remember of course that, even 2 years later, you try to kill me. And I want you to look at the person you try to kill. So I'm sitting on the stand, and, prosecutor or defense lawyers asking me questions. They'd ask a question, I'd answer a question looking at them, and then I'd look at him. I wanted eye-to-eye contact. I want you to avoid it. He finally looked one time for like a nanosecond. I'd answer the question, I'd look. I wanted this. Like, you try to kill me. And had not it been for the slip of a grenade or me being asleep, then he would have succeeded. Like, you need to look at me. So here's my takeaway for the world, that for them, that if it happened in a close-knit brotherhood of the armed forces, then it can happen in any campus, community, or organization at any time, anywhere. Domestic terrorism is a new reality. So when I was writing the book, of course I had this story about the book. At the same time, I began to watch pay attention to these other attacks. School, anything that aligned to me to be an embedded enemy or insider threat. I paid close attention to those things. So if the school attacker had attended the school, insider threat. I need organizations or workplaces where attacks happen in the workplace or attack happens at an academic institution. They need to understand there's an insider threat attack. People aren't just walking down the street saying, let's go shoot up this school. That's not what's happening. It's a fellow student, or it's a student who had already been to the school, or a student who frequents the school, or has been a professor. They're already on the inside. It's not someone coming in from the outside. Over 90% of the time, it's on the inside. That way they can focus their attention on students and their behavior and what they're doing and what they're saying and all those types of things. I think the fellow student that's attending the academic institution with the student that ends up being the attacker, they become the first line of defense. They're the ones that are going to hear it first, or hear something, and they're going to see something first. Even the administrators at the school, even the teachers, the staff, the faculty, they're going to hear something or see something first. Long before the resource officer, long before law enforcement shows up. Law enforcement shows up when the bullet starts flying. But the attacker is showing you something long before the attack.
Yeah, they always find something.
That's right. Always.
And it's always students like, oh, he said this.
He said this. Yep. I didn't, but they never do anything. So when I'm writing the book, I'm following all these attacks that align with an insider threat, like we had to face. And my goal is to try to mitigate the same thing that happened to us that happened to them. Now you think about everything I told you about this attack. We were never going to know that he wrote this stuff in his diary because we didn't see his diary. So we got duped. We got fooled. We got fooled by the proximity illusion of the uniform, of the oath. But I took all those lessons, if you will, and all that information, because these attacks that are happening in the workplace and schools or wherever, they are giving you something. In most cases, they're giving you something. I say over 90% of the time, just like you said. You always hear during an interview after the attack, oh, someone heard this or they saw that, but they didn't do anything about it. So when I wrote the book, I wanted people to know about this story, but at the same time, I wanted to give them tools to try to mitigate an attack in their environment. And the tools are, which I call proactive situational awareness strategies, or trust no one. And I told you, like, after this attack immediately, within 24 hours of the attack, I didn't trust right away. Because one of my people who wore the uniform, took the same oath, tried to kill me. So we're going to do something to mitigate that from happening again. Immediately. We're not waiting. So trust no one. Now I say that because so when you hear that, I'm not sure what you think. Well, I got to trust somebody. Okay, maybe you have to. Maybe you do. I don't know that you have to. And I said it because I know people are going to question it. And I want them to question it. I want them to question how they trust right now. And think about, do I make changes to how I trust? Or even if I do trust, do I need to trust everyone? How do I do it? Some people will say, well, I trust them until they give me a reason not to. I think that's a very flawed one. But, that's what some people do. I think people are good. Oh, wait a minute. Let me buy you a television and turn that sucker on for you. We want them to be, but are they as a whole? We got to let them show us. I'm not saying people aren't, but I'm not just giving them a carte blanche that they are. So I want people to think about how they trust. So that's the first one. The next one is observe, listen, and report. I want them to pay attention to something. I say in this component, in that particular strategy, you need two of them. Either observe a report or you listen to a report. So here's the story. Los Angeles, right across the street from UCLA, I was a property building manager of an apartment. Just took over. I come out of a door. It's January, close to 5 p.m. The light should have came on automatically because of the daylight, and it didn't. So I come out the door, go back in another door, get a pen and a piece of paper, come back out, and I'm checking all the lights. I come out a different door that second time, and that light should have came on automatically, and it didn't. So I'm writing that down, as well as checking all the rest of the lights that should be on right now. As I'm doing that, and this is long before I wrote the book, I say, if anyone is paying attention to me right now, who sees me right now, should think this is suspicious behavior. I'm casing the building now for maybe a future attack. Maybe. But the act is that of casing. If someone sees me right now, that's what they should think. Go back in the building. So now I say, well, I might as well just check all the lights inside. Hadn't done that since I took over. It's been a couple weeks. Let me do that. Start writing. Get to the 5th floor here. Freeze! Well, I've been around long enough to know if someone behind you says freeze, it's probably law enforcement, and more importantly, I should freeze. So I freeze. They tell me to put my hands up, but do that. Drop the pen, drop the paper, hands behind my back, hands on my head, get on my knees, get handcuffed, sit down. So they put me up against the wall and say, well, you fit the description that was called. And I said, no, I am the description. Because remember, I already told myself, if someone is watching me right now, they should think this is suspicious behavior. So I am the description. They ask a few more questions. I give my ID, I give my military ID. I tell them I'm probably building manager. I was doing an inspection. So that ended up being that. However, I would add that there were 5 police officers with pistols drawn. 5 police officers responded to a call of someone writing down, standing in front of an apartment building with a pen and a piece of paper. 5. That's a different story. Either the dispatch took it to another level, whoever called and reported it could not have said any more than what I was wearing, what I look like, and I have a pen and a piece of paper. So the dispatch had to accelerate it, or everyone just happened to be in the vicinity at that particular hour. Either way, the point of this is that someone observed and someone reported. The next one is know your neighbor. Now, I don't just mean your next door neighbor, because we hear some stories like this same thing. If they committed the attack or they did whatever, had no idea. It just seemed so nice. Well, they're supposed to appear that way if they're planning something. But not just know your next door neighbor, but that means know your fellow student. That means know your co-workers. Get to know people. You get to know them, they start talking. They start telling you stuff. They're not saying I'm going to plan an attack to do whatever, but they might. The more you know, the more they're going to talk. Next one is listen, don't just hear. So in this particular one, college students at a junior college are in a classroom, criminal justice class. So sophomores, kind of, so 19 years old. Got a professor in there. They start talking about guns. And a few of them say, well, I have a gun. Another guy says, I have a gun. Another guy says, I have a gun. And another one says, I have an AK-47. And they go on talking some more. And then the guy says, well, it's in the trunk of my car. So the class goes on and finishes. One student in the class goes back and he tells the person in charge of the dorm. So this is military school. So it's around like that. So he tells the TAC, I'm the TAC. Sergeant Major, so-and-so, we were in class. We were talking about guns. And so-and-so said he has an AK-47 and it's in the trunk of his car. That's what he said. Like, I don't know what you're going to do with it, but it sounded a matter of fact. All these other students in the class, to include the professor, who knows the policy that you can't have weapons on the campus, didn't say a thing. But a 19-year-old who was listening and not just hearing said it sounded a matter of fact. It can only sound a matter of fact if you're listening. Student comes back, we proceed to walk him to his car. He's about 100 yards from his car. He says, just want you to let you know before I get to my car, I have an AK-47 in the trunk of my car. Now, no ill will was planned. He had the weapon in his car, sure enough. This is a Monday, the day prior, coming back from the weekend. He was supposed to link up with a fellow student to take that AK-47 to a fellow student's dad's house who lived in a rural area who was going to lock it up. They would come out there on the weekends and shoot it, finish shooting, lock it back up. They go back to campus or wherever. But they missed link up. So he missed link up. Now it's still in the trunk of his car. This particular day, out of all days, they're talking about guns in class. Well, that's the day that you keep your mouth shut. But they can't. As I said, if you get to know them, they will talk. They're telling you. So in the end, when we say, well, we had no idea. Well, hold up. So had shots been fired, only one person was thinking along those lines, if you will, by listening. Even the professor, the adult, heard nothing different, did nothing different. Next one, gut check. So our guts are strongest sense. Just like you talked about before, at the end of these incidents, someone would probably go, well, I always thought. Well, someone's always thought. That's their gut saying they saw something, they felt something, but we need people to react to what their guts tell them. I say now in my talks, I'm going to say this in my talk here in a couple of days, that do we need a stethoscope hooked up to our gut or hooked up, using that in our ears to hear what it's saying? It's telling us, we're ignoring it. Maybe we need more clarity in hearing what it's telling us to act on it. And then last one is signs. Just like I told you before, all the signs are there, but are we paying attention to them? The shooter in the Santa Fe high school shooting a few years ago, I want to say 2018, he started off wearing a shirt to school saying born to kill. Okay, didn't say born to kill fellow students, but says born to kill. Well, that's a sign of something. Like, what are you trying to kill? So certain things that people do begs a question. But are we asking them that question? That shirt begged the question. I don't know what question was asked. So maybe they mitigate him wearing a shirt. He also wore a trench coat to school regularly. Santa Fe, Texas. You Google Santa Fe, Texas weather right now. Okay, it's June, or it's July. But you do it in October. You do it in January. It's still going to be hot, and it ain't going to be raining. But he's wearing it almost every day. It begs a question. I would say in that particular year, that particular time, there's a faculty, staff, or administrator that worked at that school who likely knew about Columbine. To me, that trench coat to school, when it ain't raining, is Columbine. Whether they intend for it to align with Columbine or not, that's the first thing I'm thinking. It's 90 degrees in October, no rain in the forecast, and you got that coat on, and you're wearing it regularly. It begs a question. I want to hear what the answer is when I ask them that. What is the why? My thought is Columbine. But they did nothing. Later, 10 dead, 10 wounded. So you talk about a sign, it's right there in front of you, but what are you going to do with it? The attacker of the Valentine's Day massacre at Stoneman Jackson High School in Florida. I forget the year off the top of my head. I forget the year, I won't say anything there. Posted online photos of him with a gun and some ugly face. Or there's, I mean, so who sees that? Well, his fellow students. Even though he went to school and finished the school, he's still hanging around the school. So as a fellow student, it's supposed to be his friend on whatever social media, following them, I should say, sees that. But keep in mind, this is the same person who's coming around your school, even though they don't go to the school anymore. They are routinely hanging around the school, but that's what they're posting. I need fellow student who observe that to report that. I don't know what this means. He's posting this with a gun, and he keeps coming around the school. Then let those adults, administrators, decide what to do next. I'm not saying that photo says I'm going to come shoot y'all up. But what does it say? With an ugly face. And what does it say? If I'm a parent, it says, don't go around him anymore. But student doesn't tell parent, student doesn't tell administrators, attack. So when they're saying, we don't have a sign. Yeah, you had a sign. You just ignore it. And we don't need everybody to try to be law enforcement. I don't even do that. I never advocate. Anything I talk about in these proactive strategies is not to advocate for anyone to put themselves between the weapon and the attacker. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about we got to use what they're giving us. Because they'll give it to us. Akbar was an anomaly. People say, what you do? I save lives by providing proactive situational awareness strategies to mitigate insider threat and active shooter attacks or mass shooter attacks. I only throw in a mass shooter attack because that's what people kind of resonate with. If I say insider threat, ooh, what's that? But mass shooter, they understand that. The mass shooter or the mass shooting is the result of the attack. That's the thing that's taking place. But who's doing it? They're on the inside. 90% of the time. Embedded Enemy is the name of the book. They can find it on Amazon. I say get the book, you get a twofer, you get the story, and you get the proactive strategies. There's other stories associated with the strategies. I need your help, audience. I need your help in that the victims of that attack that happened March 23rd never received the Purple Heart Medal. So I am actively trying to get the United States to understand that they deserve the medal. Based on what I told you, I don't know what you think, but I think you would probably agree that they deserve the Purple Heart Medal. Right now, the government's saying that because the attacker was not in communication with a foreign terrorist organization, and the attack in their minds, because he wasn't in communication with a foreign terrorist organization, then it couldn't have been inspired or motivated by that foreign terrorist organization. I argue strongly that anyone can commit an attack based on their own ideology and their own belief and don't have to communicate with anybody. Clearly, based on his statement, based on what was in his diary that he wrote, his words, that has nothing to do with being in alignment with a foreign terrorist organization, but definitely in alignment with an ideology of jihadi.
What can people do to help with that?
I would say contact your congressman. You can post online, just on your own social media. Just talk about this attack that happened March 23rd, 2003. And you can relate it to the Embedded Enemy book and story that they never received a Purple Heart Medal and that they deserve it.